Hello, welcome to the September 20th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test to make sure everything's coming through, and then we will begin. Bear with me just for a moment. Hello. All right, everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. My name is Greg Undo. I work as a product specialist for Yamaha Corporation of America, primarily focusing on Steinberg products, and I'll be the host of the live stream today. And I'm presenting from outside of Alexandria, Virginia, just outside, or in Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. in the United States. If you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always a thrill to see people from all over the world attending the live stream. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de or simply ask the question on the live chat. Realize that as we get throughout the live stream that I may not be able to answer the questions in a real-time manner in the chat, but we will try to go ahead and make sure that everything is set up chronologically. So if you don't see an immediate response, if we could refrain from asking the same questions over and over again, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, if you could specify which level of Cubase, whether it's LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or whatever, other Steinberg programs that you're running. If you're running version 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, and if you're running on Mac OS or Windows, that would be helpful. We should have an index of all of the topics with timestamps pinned to the top of the chat field, of the comments field. So look for that several hours after the live stream. I go back and rewatch the live stream and type up all the topics. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, we've covered over 20,000 questions. You could go to cubaseindex.com. We want to thank Jan from Stockholm for all of his help in putting together that website. Also, we have two people that serve as moderators. We have Agent K, who I just see isn't able to be on the live stream today, and Jazz Dude. So they're not Steinberg employees, but they really do this to make it a better live stream experience. So we want to give a special thanks to them, and also to Jazz Dude for his work. If you wanted to, with the Cubase Nation Discord, so if you wanted to find a wonderful community of really relevant information for your Steinberg needs, you could check out Cubase Nation Discord, and Jazz Dude does a lot of work with that. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. So I saw a question, it didn't carry over. I think it was asked before the live stream, maybe an hour or so ago. How to get a pre-roll in play, or how to get a pre-roll in record, but not in play. So a lot of times when we come over here, when I hit play, we could have kind of our material start immediately with that. And if we go to the transport menu, we could go to, we can see pre-roll and post-roll. So if we have pre-roll activated and we were, excuse me, in the middle of a particular project, so let's say we'll fast forward, and I'll just kind of zoom in. So let's say now if I have pre-roll activated when I hit play, we could just simply have that. Let me just make sure I have the settings here. And we have to adjust my pre-roll amount. So I'm just going to activate pre-roll and post-roll here. So as soon as we go, all right, so now when I activate pre-roll, we can see that it will just kind of go back. So say if I want to do pre-roll of a measure, that whether I'm in record or playback, that the pre-roll is engaged. So the key is not to use the pre-roll function. So I'm going to just come over here and go to transport, and we'll make sure, but we can see just to the right of the click track, we could actually have a count in. So what we could do is, if you don't see it, you'll see these three little dots here. And what we could do at this point is just choose to, so we could just kind of extend this over to the right or left. And when we extend this over, we will see this thing that's called a count in. So now when I go to the beginning, or let's say if I'm here on measure 7 and I play, it'll start right at measure 7. But if I activate record, the count in will give me 2 measures or 1 measure count in. It will default to 2 measures. So now when I hit record, we get our count in during record, but not playback. So that's how we could have kind of a pre-roll during record, but not playback. Is just simply not to use the pre-roll, but just to actually come here and activate the count in function. So if you don't see that again, go to where you see the metronome and just kind of scoot this over to the right where we see those 3 dots, and then you can activate the count in. All right, so we had another question from Andy from Riverside, California. So question is, does turning off ASIO guard on plugins help with high CPU issues? I'm currently running Cubase Pro 12. Some plugins tend to, most plugins you'll get, better performance using the ASIO guard. And we could, go to your studio menu to VST plugin manager. And when we click on a particular plugin, we could enable or disable ASIO guard on each plugin. So some plugins can cause more issues with ASIO guard enabled. So I would say my rule of thumb by default is you'd want it enabled. If you see other people that are running a particular plugin, and I think sometimes if you're running something maybe under, I've heard people, and I'm not a Vienna, like a VE Pro user, but I've heard other people say that when they run, plugins or under VE Pro, that they would disable ASIO guard, that gives them better performance. But I think you could just kind of try it on a plugin by plugin basis, or just do a Google search and see if a plugin doesn't cooperate well with ASIO guard, and then just turn it off for that particular plugin. But generally, ASIO guard would be a benefit to high CPU usage. Okay. All right, so we see Benny from Sweden. We also see Peter from Montreal, where it's a gloomy, rainy day. We have Nick from the UK. Uno Momento from Finland. We have CubaseIndex.com, Jan from Stockholm. Thanks for joining. All right, we have Patrick Becker from Germany, Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. And we have Stefan from Sweden, John Shaman, Soren from Sweden. All right, Michael Jensen from Denmark. We have the Cube from San Diego, David Griffiths from Wales. We have Gus Gomez from Pittsburgh, Michael Pierce from outside London. All right, so we see a question. In the preferences to see my send turn on when I am add a send to my channel, then I create send, turn it off by default. I need to turn it on. All right, so let's say if I come to my sends here, and I will just come and let's say I'm going to add an effects channel to it. So you can see that when I right click and add an effects channel to it, that it's automatically turned on. So let me make sure. It says when I create send, it's turned off by default and I need to turn it on. Okay. All right, so just see kind of, and then it says when you add effects to selected channel, it's turn on, but if you add effects, then add descent and turn off. So I think, let's say if I'm at this point and there is a preference, I think I know what's going on with this. So say I do new empty and I'm going to add an effects channel. So let's say we add a reverb return channel. And as we work with this, there is a preference. Let me just see, it might be under VST is connect sends automatically for each newly created channel. So at this point, I'm going to add a number of audio tracks. So we'll add 4 audio tracks. So we can see that this will be turned on. So it's not automatically turned on, but it's going to be in effects send 1. Because, you know, as adding an audio track, you may not want it always to be enabled on every single track that you add. But if you wanted to turn them all on simultaneously, I think if we hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, we could turn it on. So let's see if that is now turned on. So if they're all selected, just hold down like Alt or Option plus Shift, and then you could turn it on for all channels. So just because you add channels, you may not want it to automatically be tied directly, you know, to automatically be populated. Whereas when we go to end, we go to add a send to a particular track. So if I come here and we add a send, we're specifically doing that. So that's why there's the distinction between the two. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we have David M. checking in from near Liverpool. Thanks for being on. We have Michael Ronberg from Amsterdam, beautiful city. All right, we have John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin, and Michael Marshall from Somerset, UK. Lars Rubert from Germany. Thanks for being on the live stream today, everyone. Okay, so we see a question from the Cube. How do you set project length? Is there a way to do it besides dragging an empty MIDI box to the end of your project if you want to do 20 minutes, for example? So if you go to the project menu to project setup, or you hit Shift plus S, and then you can see project duration here. So instead of having to create kind of an empty part, just come over here and set your project duration directly there. Okay, let me just continue on. All right. Okay, so we see, how can I make the notes in the drum editor yellow? Basically, I need light colored notes over the dark background. Okay, so let's just create a drum instrument here. All right, and I'm going to come over here. I'll just create the drum map from the instrument, and I will make okay, so usually it kind of defaults to red based on the colors, but if we have this particular track here, so let's say I want it to be more yellow at this point, when we go to like the color setup, and let's say I'll just take this over here, We could choose the color scheme to be based on, pitch or channel, or we could do it based on the part. So this way we could just come over here. So if you want all of it to be yellow, you can make the drum part yellow and switch the color scheme here to part. And then you could have different, you could have yellow notes within your drum editor for high contrast. Okay, so we have Andre Pascal checking in from the Netherlands. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so we see a question. Then how do you use the marker tracks to make a selection within a 32 measure verse, for example? Okay, so let's say if I have markers, so I'm going to just add a marker track here. Right, so say I have a marker here on measure 3 and measure 6. So I think if we grab if we want to select events, if you go to the top where, like right now I'm in a combined selection tool and range tool, but if I just come here to my selection tool, I think if I double click, I could select all of the events. So if I double click with the selection tool between markers, I can now just kind of copy those events and select all the events based on markers. So as soon as you go to between two different markers, let's say if I wanted to select all the events here, just go into kind of the top area where it acts as a range tool. And now we could just select all of the parts globally just by double clicking with the range tool between two markers. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see Sir Robert clocking in from Atlanta. Great to have you on. So we see, hi Greg from Montenegro. Question, can tracks automatically get colored the color of the group track they're routed to? So let me just say I'm going to take these tracks here, and let's say we're going to route them to a group channel. Okay. So let me see if I might be able to do this with the Project Logical Editor. Okay, so I want to say we're going to take groups, and then I want to set the property is set to parent object. I'm not sure if this would work. And let's try set color. Let's say to red here. Yeah, I think you might have to do it manually. So I know that we could sometimes do this for automation and routing. to select. So I think that you might have to set the these manually with that. But if you want to email me, I could play around, see if there's, but I don't think that there's a way to select the events that are routed to a particular group, but I'll take another. So if I just come here, I could change them all simultaneously. Let me take another idea maybe popped in my mind. So we may be able to let's see if we could. All right, let me just. All right, so let's see if we can take this approach where we could add those and all right, let's see if we could add these to select a group channel and see if those all stay selected. Yeah, so I don't know a way of doing that other than manually, but if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, but you know, you could always just select the different ones, select your color tool, and then be able to change quickly like that. Sorry about that. All right, so we see hello from Amsterdam. Question: when I use tempo detection, my signature track and tempo tracks don't show. They did previously. What can I do or check to resolve this? Okay, so mine have always just kind of shown up. So when I do this, I'll just do a tempo detection just from one single track. And then as soon as that is done, so one thing that you could check just out of curiosity is if you go to visibility, if maybe like, check to see that maybe they're not hidden. Or if you're doing it in a big track, it usually does it, the signature track directly above the selected track. But if it's in a folder, it may also be at the top of the folder. So if you have folder tracks, so it may be kind of above or below the folder tracks, but check into visibility and see, or even if you just search here for signature and tempo, and see if they show up here in this list. But it seems like, every time I've done it, it's automatically, popped those two tracks in, but maybe they're just kind of appearing somewhere else. But check to see if you see them in the visibility tab or when you search as well. All right, question. Could you show the most effective way people use retrospective recording? What's it good to take advantage of that? So let's say I am, just noodling around and everyone has, let's say you're just here. I'll just... see if I get my... All right, so let's say my MIDI controller doesn't want to cooperate today. Let's say I was, just noodling around. So let's say I have my virtual keyboard and, I just happen to... And you just played, like, let's say the greatest theme of all time, but you weren't in record. So now at this point, that's when I could hit retrospective record. And then all of the data would just appear directly as if I had played it. So anytime, I know many phone composers, and their running joke is I haven't hit record in years, because they would just, as they are noodling around, they will just at that point. Sorry, my MIDI controller is not working today, but. And you're not in record, just now hit retrospective record, and all the data would just appear directly in your timeline as if you were recording. So it'll keep a buffer of all that information so that if you played the perfect part but wasn't in record again, that you could just hit retrospective record and it would just show up. All right, so we see Tommy C. Great to see you on the live stream. And Marumbolo from Germany. Thanks for being, or Marumbolo. Thanks for being on the live stream today. All right, so I just see a question. Where has the divider gone? Like if we wanted to have projects where we wanted particular elements to be up top or on the bottom. So I'll just revert. So if you wanted to have like where my marker tracks would always stay in top, what you need to do is you click right here. And for the divide track list, you'll see like a little slash underneath here. And then that would create the divided track list. And then to turn the divided track list on or off, you could now at this point just look for the little slash in the upper right hand corner of the project window. Okay, just reading through comments. Okay, so we have a question. When dragging an audio clip with the same name of an audio clip already in the session into the session, you get the old. Any way to make Cubase automatically rename the new audio clip? All right, so let me just try to replicate this.
In light we lay.
All right. So I have that. I'm going to drag it again. All right, so I just see, so it says when dragging an audio clip with the same name of an audio clip already in the session into the session, you get the old. Any way to make Cubase automatically rename the audio clip? So I think it, if it is the same name, so here, we kind of took this same exact file and we copied it twice into our project. Let's say if I copy it in a third time, so it's going to be the same file that's being referenced, but if you wanted to change the description, you could go to the info line and just select the event here. And from the info line right here, you'll see description field, and you could just enter in new descriptions there. But I think the default behavior of keeping the same names makes sense and is good. But let me know if I misunderstood the question. All right, so we have Zounds by Themo from checking in from Chicago. Thanks for being here today. All right, and we have the Tooster from Munich. Always wanted to go to Munich. Maybe when next time I go to Germany, I'm going to try to get some time out to go to some other cities besides Hamburg. Okay, my chat just jumped on me, so. All right, so we see question. Every time I drag and drop an audio sample from the Splice app, it says audio file not supported, but if I drag it from the folder it's saved in, it works. Is this error from Splice or Cubase? So it could be, I think, I know lots of people are using audio files from Splice, so I'm not sure if there's any additional metadata that's utilized. It could be maybe that it could be like, running Cubase as administrator or not as administrator. Can make a difference. I don't use Splice a lot, but try to run Cubase not as administrator and as administrator and see if that makes a difference. Maybe someone who uses Splice could chime in. All right, so we have a question. What does the input transformer do? So a lot of times when we have a particular, like a MIDI controller, let's say if we have a MIDI controller, what the input transformer is going to allow you to do is to take different messages, different MIDI messages, and be able to transform them on the input. And this could be stuff like, okay, let's get to our input transformer. We could put it at the project level or the track level. And we go to open the panel. At this point, we could say, like, I want to transform every note. So we'll say we want to take notes, and then I want to be able to take every note and take the value 1 of a MIDI note is pitch, and let's say I want to add 12. So now every incoming MIDI note would be up an octave. Or I wanted to filter out aftertouch from my MIDI controller. So I wanted to come here, we'll say type is equal to aftertouch. And then at this point, we could, if our controller is always spitting out aftertouch, we could just simply delete the aftertouch message directly from so it's not even captured. So it's going to automatically filter it. So it's going to take incoming MIDI information, stuff like I have a MIDI CC. I want to take my modulation wheel that's spitting out MIDI CC1. So I could say, let's take our type is equal to controller, and we could say value 1 of the controller is going to equal modulation. So, and at this point, I want to take modulation MIDI CC1, and then we want to be able to add 10 so that we can turn MIDI CC1 into MIDI CC11. So the input transformer will take incoming MIDI messages and alter them, so like really helpful ways. So all right, so we have Little Studios Online. Says Chris here from Maine, new to Cubase, loving it so far. So welcome to the live stream, and we're happy that you're now in the Steinberg family. And we hope to see you on many more live streams. Thanks for joining us today. All right, and wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California. So we have a question, Greg, your top features why you loved Cubase. Initially, I still, like early on, Cubase was the first program that had this whole, I see my part, it comes in here. Like this part doesn't come into right here and then it stops. So I loved kind of this whole, I think originally like the marketing from 32 years ago, they called it visual song processing. And that you could do all the editing while it played. I still love that, 32 years later, I have, a scissors tool that works the same way. I have an eraser tool. So these core functions have, for my whole time of using Cubase, which is getting on 32 years, haven't really ventured. And I think, one of the things that I also really appreciate is that Cubase doesn't necessarily predefine a workflow. I see a lot of programs and a lot of plugins where you have to, it only allows you to work this one particular way. So I never liked applications or programs or tools that, like it was kind of a predefined, predestined workflow. Whereas Cubase, I could always work differently and still be able to get everything done without doing the same exact steps that everyone else was doing and making records or, tracks that all sound the same. So those are things that, and I still get excited, when I start working with new version of Cubase, I'm still like a kid on, getting up early on Christmas morning, and, just love looking at the splash screen, seeing what's changed and, so super excited about all the progress that Cubase has done. It's just amazing, what's gone on. All right, so we see a question. when it comes to songwriting, do you know of any great third-party songwriting templates for Cubase? There are some, and these may be a bit older, but like if we go to new project, you can check out like recording, scoring, production. There's these here. I realize that these aren't third-party, but I'm sure that there are third-party templates. I don't go looking for third-party templates for a lot of my work, but I know that people are sharing orchestral templates, and I'm sure that there's third-party contents. One area to look would be on the Cubase Nation Discord. If you could find it anywhere, you'd probably find it there. All right, so a question says, "Hi there, I'm trying to demo currently." It's from Joaquim Have Faith. Says, "Building a template. Is it possible to disable all tracks? Can only find enable all tracks, preferably disable all tracks with no MIDI data associated with it." So yeah, if you wanted to come here, so whatever you have selected, you could just right click and you'll see enable, disable tracks. So disable selected tracks. So you could do that. And then you could right click to enable selected tracks. And then you could actually, create. So let's say I have a number of instrument tracks. So let's say I have MIDI data here. And I have a MIDI part here. So let's say I have no data on these particular instrument, on this track, in this track. So we could come over. Let me just go to my project logical editor. And I think that there's a preset in here already. So we could say, so we want to select and I think we could come over here. So let's say we want to select track. All right, so say container type, let's select a track. And then I think we could go to property is set to event is empty. So here we could select all tracks that are empty. So we just did that. And then what we could do is just come, and I think it's under enable, disable track, disable/enable track under audio. So it works for instrument tracks as well. So we're going to take tracks that are empty and disable them. So at this point, let's say I have this track selected. So we're going to, again, container type is equal to track, property is set to empty, and then audio, enable, disable track. So at this point, they're now just disabled like so. So let me know if that helps, and welcome to the trial version. We hope that you are on many more live streams in the future where we could help you out as you become a Cubase user, hopefully. And if you are also, we have a lot of people that are new to the live stream, and it's probably because we have the promotion going on. So, I think through October 3rd. So, you could get, Cubase new versions and updates for 40% off. Plus, if you're a new user or an existing user, you can get up to, if you have Cubase Pro, up to 5 different plugins free of charge. And you can find those in your My Steinberg account under vouchers. Take advantage of that if you haven't done it yet. All right, so we have Siam Dinesh G from India saying hi. Thanks for being on the live stream. Welcome. All right, and the venerable Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas is on. So virtual ice cream to everyone. And Michael's from outside of Dallas, Texas. All right, so I have a question. Can you explain how to trigger start and stop of external devices like drum machines? I'm able to connect all channels to my TR-8S, but I need to start it. On the drum machine. Okay. So if you have, so if you wanted Cubase to be the master, which probably makes more sense for how the synchronization is going to be set up with your drum machine, we would go to your transport, and we could say, okay, I want it to activate external sync, but we'll go to our project synchronization setup, and we'll say destination. So with drum machines, generally you send MIDI clock. So wherever the drum machine is probably connected to like a USB output port, you wanted to check this. And as soon as we come over here, we go to the transport menu, and we can say activate external sync. So now when you hit play in Cubase, your drum machine will start to play. Yet you may have to tell your drum machine to, basically to listen to external clock. And the external clock will follow the playback. So at that point, you could just hit play in Cubase and then have your drum machine sync to it. If you wanted to start this sync from Cubase, it's probably your drum machine probably isn't capable of properly being a master. So it's not going to really be like the master clock source. So you could assign like a MIDI note if you wanted to actually initiate this sequence. You could go to like if you go to the MIDI remote here, you could just assign different functions and have this MIDI note, when you hit the message, have this when we, define the note and then go into the mapping assistant and have it, do start and stop. Generally, for drum machines, because they can't drive digital audio properly in terms of clock resolution. So I would always suggest that you go, to the transport and just, set up MIDI clock output to your drum machine. Have, set your drum machine to listen to external clock. And at that point, activate external sync directly from the transport menu or from the transport, and then when you hit play in Cubase, your drum machine will play right along in sync. All right, so we have Tiago checking in from Brazil. Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. So, all right, wonderful to see Mark Rabin back on the live stream from Montana. Hope you're doing well. All right, so we have a question. I'm trying to pitch correct a vocal track in Very Audio, but when I duplicate it to make harmonies, the edits I make to the second track would change the first as well. Anyone facing this problem? So what it is you may have it on, so probably what you did was we took a vocal track and at this point we would say duplicate tracks. Now when we do that, it looks like we have two separate audio files. But really what it is these are the same audio file. So if we do editing on one file, and this is the same exact file, at that point, the edits from this would automatically be applied to this. So to stop that is we need to turn this into a separate file. Easiest way to do it is go to select the event, go to your audio, to bounce selection. It'll ask you if you want to replace events. Say yes. And now it's a new, separate, distinct audio file. So when I do Very Audio edits on this one, so say we'll go to measure 25, and I want all these to be the same note. And now when I go to Very Audio on this one, and we go to measure 25, we can see that these will be independent here. So now we could have completely, so we'll start these on F. And now we come here, we can move these up. So you want them to be separate audio files. So again, after you duplicate it, so instead of editing the same file, what you need to do is to just turn this into a separate audio event. And then so you can do that again by selecting it, going to audio and selecting bounce selection, and then choosing to replace the events. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you do learn a new tip or trick, please feel free to hit the like button. That enables us to continue to do these live streams. See, Nick is just saying that like button needs a slap. So, all right, we see Michael Teens is going to be celebrating his 50th anniversary this week. Congratulations. That's a huge milestone. So happy for you both. Okay, so we have a question. After you do tempo detection on an audio file, is there a way to flatten it out to warp the whole audio file to one straight tempo? Okay, so let's jump back. Okay, so let's say we do our tempo detection on this file, and I'm going to select it first. That would help. All right. All right, and as we work with this, we'll see that it's going to have a lot of varying tempos. So if I wanted to take the file and make it play back at a steady tempo, what I would do is just select the event, go to Audio, and say Advanced, and then we'll choose Set Definition from Tempo. And we could do it either writing it to the project or as metadata into the file itself. So right now I see that it's going to be varying in tempo, so I'm going to just deactivate. So now it's playing back a perfectly steady tempo. So if I want it to be 144. So basically we could do this for a single event or multiply selected events. So So now it's playing back perfect tempo, perfectly steady for something that was fluctuating. Would be 156. So we can see kind of the original tempo here and what tempo it's following. So after doing the tempo detection, select the event or events, go to audio, to advanced, to set definition from tempo. And then you could have it something that was varying in tempo and had tempo fluctuations play back a perfectly steady tempo. Okay, just reading through comments. Okay, so you see from Adrian Schreiber Music, new to Cubase, how do I get started recording over an instrumental? So I assume it's going to be maybe like a backing track of audio. And if you wanted to record audio, so let's say we have a backing track here. And we wanted to record guitar or saxophone or whatever over it. All we would have to do is to right click and we could add an audio track. So if you want to record audio or if you want to record a virtual instrument, we would choose instrument track, or an external MIDI keyboard. We could choose MIDI. So I'll just choose audio. And I can say, okay, I want to record my guitar, my saxophone, my voice, whatever, as a mono source. I'll hit OK. So at this point, I would enable this track to record, and I want to turn on the monitor enable, and then all I have to do is on that track, just hit record. And whatever sources I have being sent to that would automatically just be recorded. So add the type of track you want, whether it's audio for, you know, your voice, guitar, sax, bass. An instrument track is for virtual instruments or MIDI. Record enable the track. You want to set kind of the correct audio inputs. And we could see that in our input tab. So if you go to studio to audio connections, here we can see all of our inputs. And these are the ones that are connected to our audio interface. Set the input that you want and enable, record enable and monitor enable, and hit record and have fun. Okay, reading through comments. All right, we see, nice to see Brian Sawyer from North Carolina. He's at the aquarium. Looks like he's with his grandkids. That's wonderful. And he stopped by to smash the like button. That's very kind of you, Brian. Enjoy your time with your grandkids. All right, so we have a question. Is it possible to maintain audio warp markers visible in multiple tracks at the same time? When I click in an event to edit, the markers in other tracks become hidden. So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so it's all right. So let's say I wanted to, let's say I'll select these and let's go to my So I have my warp markers on those tracks. Now let's say if I select another track, I will do my warp markers here. So I think if we wanted to see multiples, let me see if I just have this. Let me just change one preference. So here we could see whatever warp markers we want. Let me just check. So here, if I select multiple ones, I could just, let me just put it in the right free warp. So I could adjust this warp. So, you know, it's as we have multiple selected, you know, what can happen is, you know, when we have multiple selected, it would kind of warp these together kind of as a collective group because we, you know, we want to be able to take that. But if you don't have, you know, so, but if we just select each one, we can see that. But when we want to see multiple, you know, if we have that selected, at that point we could, you know, when we do warp editing with all of the warp markers selected, the edit will be applied to all the different parts. So I'm not sure if that's what you wanted to do, but you could also at this point take these three, and let's say if I put this into a folder track. So I'll just say move selected tracks to new folder, and then at this point we could, you know, whatever that we have selected, we can warp together. So if you want to do that for drums, and then you could see different warp markers. But a lot of times it's going to be, you know, it shows you what you're actually going to be warping on. Just to kind of, you know, and even if we see kind of our markers here, so let's say if I click and I'll deactivate this, so let's say I just click on one particular part and say I'm in free warp here, that I could still see kind of the, you know, the markers without those selected if necessary. So we could kind of see the hit points underneath without it being visible. But if you just select, you know, multiple events, you know, whatever is selected, you could do that, but you run into the risk of at that point, you know, being able, when you do a warp on one, that it could be applied to multiple events, and that may not be what you want to do. All right, so we have Mopman checking in from Maryland. Thanks for joining us. And we have Jay from Connecticut. Great to see you on, Jay. Thanks for being on. My chat field just jumped on me. Let me just jump back, find my way. Okay, so I think I'm back to where I was. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to only hear the MIDI event being recorded and not the existing MIDI event over which I am recording MIDI in linear recording mode, new parts? Okay, so let me just add. Okay, so let's say I'll just record. Okay, so I'll just put it into record. So I'll just play a low note here. I'll just let this go for a while. Okay, so to only hear the MIDI event being recorded, so let's go to our MIDI record modes, and I'll just choose replace. So let me just come here, and I'll knock up just a higher note. So say now I'm just gonna. So I don't hear the original note. It's a cool patch. I have to remember that one. So, but now it's, so it's just, so there it's only, so the original part was just replaced. So it just went to the MIDI record mode from the transport and just chose replace instead of new parts or merge. So I just hit replace, and that seemed to do the trick. Let me know if that is what you want to accomplish. So Mark Rabin is saying 92 watching and 48 likes. Stop and hit the like. All right, that's a good point. Okay, so we have from Perry Michael Allen. So can side chaining function in offline processing? So I don't think in offline processing, but if you do a like when you render files, and I think, but we'll go ahead and give it a shot. So and just take a look. But I don't think that the offline processing, I know that when we render in place or like, so let's say if I want to take just a small section of this and I want the bass to be triggered, let's say a compressor by kick. All right, so just come here to dynamics and let's say, okay, I want to do like just obnoxious compression on the bass, and we'll sidechain it do a kick, and activate the sidechain. So when we play, so when our kick comes in, okay, so let's come over to our direct offline processing, and let's say I want to go to the bass, and we'll come here to our direct offline processing. Let's see if we could even access. So I'll just say plugin, and let's. Yeah, so it doesn't look like we could do the from direct offline processing, but if we wanted to just do, let's see if we do like a render in place with this setup, and we'll do the complete signal path, and I'll try not to have it record enabled. So when we do render in place, we could probably see so that's automatically carried over in the render in place, or if we do an export audio mixdown, the side chaining is carried over there, but the direct offline processing isn't going to be contingent upon other things. But if you just do render in place, you can get the same exact effect, and that's in version 12 that that you could render with the side chaining intact. All right, so we have Spencer B checking in from Atlanta. Thanks for being on the live stream today. Okay, so we have from Young Metro, says, your control room looks quite different than the default one I have. Can you elaborate on control room, how you set it up and use of it? So, the concept of the control room is going to be, that it is a separate monitoring stage of the mix console. So we need to go over here to the control room. And here, why mine may look different is I may, have different, external inputs. I have my 4, Q mixes configured, the headphone channels. I have 4 different monitor sources configured. So as these things get configured, the different options will become available depending on what you have configured in your control room. So, one of the great things with the control room is as we're mixing a particular source, we see that if I adjust my master volume, that our output volume here is adjusted. But the control room would allow me to adjust the monitoring path, the monitoring signal, without affecting the volume in the mixer. So this is really my monitor source. And if I wanted to switch between different speaker monitors, I could just come right here and be able to switch. And this is taking outputs from my audio interface and feeding to different outputs that are connected to speakers. I could also do down mix presets. I want to listen to it in mono or stereo. So those are some of the different things. So if my control room looks different, it's probably just I have more stuff kind of turned on for headphone mixes and speakers. All right. John Koskian is asking Michael Teens if he's hit the like button. He says, if not, that I may press the detonate button. So I like the live stream, so I don't want to detonate it. But all right, so we have Mark Winslow saying aloha from Hawaii. It's one of my favorite places in the world. I had a wonderful vacation in Maui, so in April of this year. So it says, when I open a Nuendo file in Cubase, all the faders are set to minus 12 dB. Is there a way to change the default to Unity with just a stereo out set to minus 12 dB? All right, so let me come over here to Nuendo, and I'll just save a file here. I'll test it. Trying to get this figured out with my IT department at work. It's kind of annoying. All right, so I'm going to create a project in Nuendo here. All right, so we have 16 tracks. They're all set to 0 dB. Okay, so I'm going to save. Okay, so let's exit out of Nuendo and open this inside of Cubase. So it's all set here the same. So I'd never noticed that. One thing that it could be is if we come, let's try going to a project menu to project setup. Check to see like if, maybe the volume max, because we could have 12 dB or minus 6 dB or, our volume max. See if you change that to 6 dB, if that makes a difference. But it seems like everything just kind of carried over exactly at 0 dB from the Nuendo project directly into Cubase. So maybe the person, was running it through a VCA fader or a plugin to get more gain. But it seems like it's automatically carrying over the correct settings. So let me know if that helps, Mark. And I'm jealous that you get to live in Hawaii. So I got to go to I got to speak at the Hawaiian Grammy Awards. I think probably like 2011. It was such a great trip. So. All right, so we see Michael Pierce just asking, do the Steinberg team not allow you around the country? Try Heidelberg too. So I did get to go to Heidelberg one time when I was at the Frankfurt show, like in 1994. We did it. My boss who hired me, Russ Jones, took me to Heidelberg for a day trip. I've been to Berlin for meetings. I've been, I did a weekend trip from Hamburg to the Netherlands, I got to go up to kind of the very northern coast on a Sunday day trip up to the beach north of Hamburg, where we could see, I think, Denmark across the North Sea. So, but a lot of times if, hopefully I'll be able to, take my family and spend more time in Germany. So, but my colleagues in Hamburg are always incredibly kind and, going out to their houses for dinner and stuff like that. So wonderful group of people. All right. I see that Jazz Dude just mentioning Hamburg's in the north. So I guess probably Hamburg to Heidelberg might be like from London to Scotland, something like that. That might be, I could be off on distance, but it's kind of like that. Okay, so we see from Jay from Connecticut, says, hi, Greg. I'm considering getting a Mac to use for my recordings, multiple interfaces without ASIO issues. That stated, as a computer, would you be so kind as to pull up your system specs? Yeah, so I got this new Mac maybe 5-6 weeks ago. So, you know, it's an M1 Max with 64 gigs of RAM. So it's just 14-inch MacBook Pro. And I got 2 terabytes. And we have to hold on to our computers for a long time. So, you know, we have 2.5 years. So I try to get as much storage space and processor as I possibly can. So that's what I'm currently using. But realize if you're going to be using multiple audio interfaces that, you know, if you're doing it with the aggregate device drivers on Mac OS, that you will be compounding latencies. So, you know, so there's always kind of a gotcha. So just be aware of that before you say, oh, now I have 3 interfaces and I have, 60 milliseconds of latency at all times. Okay, so we see Neil S. says, hi, glad to be here from the UK. These sessions are seriously helpful. Thank you. So thanks for being a part of the live stream, and we hope that we could answer questions for you. So we have just a question. Is it a big problem if I record a project at 96 kilohertz 32-bit and I export it to 44.1 kilohertz 24-bit? So no, there's, it's very common to, record at higher resolutions and be able to deliver at lower resolutions. So, there's, really powerful dithering inside of Cubase to allow you to do that, as well as the Lin 1 dither. So it's not a big problem at all. All right, so we see from Guitar Play-Alongs, it says, hey, Greg, thanks for all the great tips. So you're welcome, and thanks for being a part of the community today. And thank you for the kind words. Okay, so we have a question. How to import a MIDI sequence out of Apache 5 into a new MIDI track for editing. All right, so let me just open up different project. Okay, so let's say all right, so I have a synth bass part, and I'm just going to turn on Apache. So let's say I'll just turn this on, and I'll just open up my virtual keyboard here. Okay, so a lot of times when we record, okay, so I'm just holding down a chord. So I come over here and I record. So as I do this, we see the arpeggios, but when I look at the parts themselves, it's just like long notes. So 2 different ways of doing it. So if I have existing kind of long notes that are being triggered through a MIDI plugin, what you could do is go to MIDI, and it's the very aptly named Freeze MIDI Modifiers. And then that will take that and turn it directly into a MIDI event. Now, another way of doing it, if you're doing it live, is you'll see this little MIDI record icon. So let's say as we're here, I'm triggering. So as soon as that's on, what it's going to do is actually record the output. I'm just going to turn off my auto quantize. Sorry about that. Operator error. Hate when I mess up. All right. So now clicking on this little MIDI record icon, that will record the output to the track. So at that point, what it'll do is just take the arpeggiator and actually record the output of the arpeggiator directly to the track. So just turn that on, and then as you play, that will be outputted. If not, if you just have, if you record it without that, all you have to do, again, is go to MIDI and just go to freeze MIDI modifiers, and that will kind of transform the long notes that are holding down a chord, triggering the arpeggiator into, with all of the settings from the MIDI inserts directly in the event itself. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so we see not really Cubase related, but Nuendo. How do you change the sync point of clips in Nuendo? Like when editing to picture and the point you want to sync is not at the beginning of the clip, but later. So just really kind of the same exact functionality in Nuendo or Cubase. So let's say, all right, so I just have, let me just, all right, so let's say I have this, and this had changed slightly in Cubase 12. So let's say I want it, like when we go into the sample editor, I'm not going to go to very audio. And I think, and this had changed, make sure. So we're going to say show events. Or show, so we want to show clips in events or show events. So now I can move this snap point, let's say, to the middle, and we can see it right here. So now as we want to snap, the event won't necessarily snap to the beginning of the event. No, I'll just move it somewhere a little more random. So we see that this line is kind of our snap point or sync point. And now that is what is snapping to the grid or what is snapping to the video as opposed to the beginning of the clip. So we want to, in version 12, you want to make sure that we have it set to show events. And then you'll see kind of this sync point here. Move it from the beginning to wherever you want. And then that will be the basis for how it snaps to the grid. All right, so we have a question from Jason just asking, can someone explain to me the shortcuts we can use to transpose MIDI in the MIDI editor? Okay, so let's say I'm here. Okay, so let's say I have all these notes selected. So if I wanted to just go up using my arrow keys, I could do that. I could also, if I hold shift plus arrow up, that would be an octave up or octaves down. Holding down the shift keys, or if you wanted to move chromatically, just move all the notes with the up and down arrow. And then I think if you wanted to transpose to scales, you could, not that, but there is also, it's good to, you go to the transpose setup, and here you could do the different scales, so you could set that as well. So let me know if that's what you're looking for. So shift plus arrow is octaves, and just arrow up and down will be just moving it by semitones or one pitch. All right, just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. And again, if you learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button. And we do this every Tuesday and Friday, unless there's a special occasion that I have to get called out of town for. All right, so we see the Tooster has been using Cubase since Atari ST1040. I was a proud owner of a Mega 4 with 4 megabytes of RAM and a 30 megabyte hard drive. All right, so we see, can I disable the velocity while recording MIDI? So when you record a MIDI note, it's automatically going, part of a MIDI note message, a component of a note in MIDI is going to include velocity. So, every MIDI note message is going to have a velocity value. So the two are kind of the two are linked together, so they can't really be separated. But we can do stuff like if we wanted to fix velocities so that, whatever, so if we go to like our input transformer, at this point, you could just say, okay, I want to take my track and I wanted to have a preset where, okay, we're going to say type is equal to value 2, and we want to set our velocity to 100, or let's say, okay, I want it to be 127. So now kind of whatever notes you play will automatically have a velocity of 127. But it's almost like saying, so again, but every MIDI note will have a velocity component in it. It's like saying, can I have a word without letters? So, but if you wanted to fix the velocity so that as you're inputting, it could be a known fixed element, you could do that using the Project Logical Editor. So, and we would choose transform, and then we'll say value 2 is equal to whatever. So, but every MIDI note message will have a velocity component. All right, so we see Fab is just mentioning the free plugins for Cubase 12 users include the Arturia CS80, by the way. So yeah, that's a wonderful instrument. And great stuff from Softtube and Acoustica as well. And Celemony Systems. So we see Cubase. Hey, Greg, if you take advantage of the sale, how long do you have to activate Cubase 12? Thinking of building a new box, but will be a while before it is ready. So I think there's no limit to when you activate Cubase, but you may want to just, get all of the, I think what could be time dependent is if you wanted all of the plugins. So I would, because after October 3rd, I think that's the last day that you can get the plugins. at no charge, and then those will disappear. So that's more kind of the time critical component of it. So. Okay, so we have a question that says, if I duplicate a melody line onto another MIDI clip, is there a way I can reduce the velocity of individual notes in both MIDI clips at the same time? All right, so let's go ahead and give it a shot. So let's say I will just fix the velocities of these. Okay, so let's say we have okay, so if I had both of them selected, it looks like I could. So say I move all these up, and then I select this event. Those are selected. So if they're completely overlapping, let me see if I stretch this out here. So if they're completely overlapping, you might have to just toggle back and forth. But let's say if I wanted to, and if you have these where like they're on top of each other, but you want them to be in one event, just hold down the glue gun. I think it's Alt or Option, and then you could just merge so that they're all in one particular event. But if they're completely overlapping, you would have to, do it individually. But if you could select both of the events stacked, that you should be able to adjust the velocities at the same time. So let me know if that helps. All right, so we have Diversiem saying hi from Germany. So we just see a question from Eric Sampson. Hi, Greg. Is there a plan to provide a script for complete control devices, remote MIDI surface control script? I tried to create one, but I miserably failed. So there's probably some that are available. If you go to the Steinberg forums, there's a whole kind of download area. And kind of the intention of this is, the developers of the controllers, we've sent copies of the software out so that the the actual developers of the controllers who know their controllers the best are creating their MIDI remote scripts for it. So I don't, I'm not sure if Steinberg's going to be creating, MIDI remote scripts for every controller in the world, but we create it so that users can make it and that companies can release it so that their controller integrates better with Cubase. Okay, so we see from Jason just about keyboard shortcuts for transposing. It says, I want to change, for example, the MIDI transpose from shift up to control up, but I don't find it in shortcuts. I ask myself, under what folder can I find that in the shortcuts? So I don't think, some functions are going to be fixed and not really user assignable for editing. So I don't know of a way to do that, but let's take a look. Just in case, some are just kind of hard coded into it. But let's say if I go, so when I type shift plus up, and some key commands are going to just kind of be fixed for particular windows. You may want to maybe go to navigate, add up, and see if that makes a difference, but realize that, that may also kind of infringe on other keyboard shortcuts. So some keyboard shortcuts are just kind of like, for editing, are just kind of fixed and can't be changed as easily. So see, Little Studio Online says, not gonna lie, this stream feels like a company lunch and learn, and says, ha ha ha, I love it. So yeah, and Michael Teams will probably grant you an exotic ice cream flavor, so even better. So all right, so we see a question from 704 Future. If I try to listen to my audio recording solo, I can't. So, if you're soloing the record, it could be that maybe like as you're recording, if you wanted to listen to it solo, depending on the settings for your audio interface. So it could be if you go to your studio setup and select your audio interface here, that you might want to enable direct monitoring for your particular interface. So try toggling that and see if it makes a difference. So some interfaces, while they're recording how it's being routed, may have you monitor other sources, but try doing direct monitoring and see if that helps, and if you can let us know what audio interface it is. Okay, so I just see it records and maybe this is kind of a clue. So from 704 Future says, if I try to listen to my audio recording solo, I can't. It records both the beat and the audio as well. So probably what you have is an audio interface. Maybe, I get this question a lot from people that have digital, like a mixer that has a USB analog output. Because what happens often is anything that's being fed into the mixer, like the audio returning, will often be re-recorded, because the mixer is just capturing whatever the output of the mixer is. Sometimes there's a USB return path that will allow you to not send that, the information coming from the computer back to the output, But a lot of USB mixers, they just kind of capture everything as a stereo outstream. And then when you're playing back through the USB mixer, some of them just, recapture the data that's coming back. So there may be, like on my mixers, there's like a separate, DAW return channel that doesn't get repassed out, of the signal. So check that. But if you could let us know, 704 Future, what audio interface you're using, it's probably, my guess, if I had to guess, would be kind of a USB mixer. So, okay, so we have a question from Eric Sampson. What is the best way to remove silent parts from an audio track? Okay, so I'll just come here. All right, so I'll select these, and I'll just bounce the selection quickly. So we'll have silent parts in our audio track. So probably the easiest way to do it is to select the event, go to audio, and then you'll see, I think it's under advanced, you'll see detect silence. So here we could set the threshold, and we'll say analyze. And we could, adjust your threshold settings. Say, okay, within this threshold, that's going to be silence, process, and then it will just automatically chop the audio. So just go to audio, to advanced, and choose detect silence. All right, so we have Filter Freak just popping in. Say hi. So thanks for joining us. Okay, so I just see from Little Studios Online, when performing a track, listen L, is there a way to have it output at the same level? It appears to change volume. I'm using the control room. So let's say I'm here. Okay. And I go to my mixer. So let me just put the loop on. All right, so we hit the L. So it could really, when you go to control room, click on the main, and then you could just have the listen level. So now we could kind of so you want to just adjust the listen dim. So you get it louder. So you'll see the listen dim amount right here. So, and to get this, it's kind of a little tricky thing since it's at the bottom. You just want to click on the main, and then you could adjust the settings there. So now it should be softer. So set your listen dim here to 0, and then it'll be the same volume. All right, so we see from Eric Sampson. Hi, Greg. I upgraded to version 12. It's great. It says, I still have Cubase 11. I have tested all my projects and they work well in Cubase 12. What is the best process to uninstall Cubase 11 now? So if you're on Windows, you could just do just right click on, if you go to the program icon, right click and uninstall. You could do that. If you're on Mac, you could just grab the Mac actual program icon and just move it to the trash. So just standard operating system uninstall routines. So, but unless you're really hard up for space, it's always easier to it's always easier just to leave both versions on. So a lot of people do that, but it's pretty small overall. Okay, so we just see a question. Is the new Razor plugin a better version of Maximizer, or am I missing something important? New interesting feature. So, it's kind of a different algorithm. So a lot of people use it for, doing all sorts of EDM type functions. But let me just come over here. So let's take a look at the Razor. So, and this is really kind of, set up for doing, so it could handle kind of dynamics a little bit differently. And it also has kind of inner sampling. So when you have peaks between samples, but in the end, they both can make your mix louder. What they do with the transients can be different. So you may have some projects where, the Maximizer works great, and some projects where the Razor may work a little bit better. But how this handles the transients, I think, is something, that level of control that you don't really get. And if you have inter-sample clipping, the Razor can manage that as well. But both plugins sound great. All right, so we have Patrick Arend joining, saying howdy. So thanks for joining us. All right, my chat field just jumped, so let me just find my spot. So I have lots of questions in my future here. All right, so I think I'm close to where I was. All right, so we see from Patrick asking, thinking of upgrading to Cubase Pro, how many external MIDI instruments can I run at a time with Pro? Thanks for any info. So it's really just up to how many inputs and outputs you have of your audio interface. So if you have like 8 ins and 8 outs of your audio interface, and you wanted to run, three external instruments in stereo, you could have like probably outputs 1 and 2 going to your speakers. And then you could have or inputs, let's say, you could have inputs 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and 7 and 8 be stereo inputs coming directly from your external instrument. So it's really only limited by how many inputs you have on your audio interface. All right. So C from Soren. Have you seen the Gilad Hexelman Produce Like a Pro mix competition? So I haven't followed that. So if you entered a competition, would you take away guitar finger scratch sounds? And can you show that in spectral layers? So it depends. I mean, sometimes you want some finger squeaks to make it sound authentic. Like I often think of like breaths. Like, if you have a singer that never takes a breath, it could sound a little like, it sounds more robotic than like minimizing breaths. But let me just see if I have. So say we'll show you how to kind of do it in spectral layers. I think I may have a guitar squeak. Okay, so let's say if we have all right, so let's say we want to take a look at this. So I'm going to just go to spectral layers here. So probably you see a lot of this is kind of being the squeak area. So let's say I just wanted to we just minimize some of that squeak. So I just hit the delete key. And I'll just take it off. So you could do a lot to just kind of minimize. So even just kind of taking that and deleting it, and that will kind of get rid of like different squeaky frequencies. So now as we play, take just these. And let's say I'll switch this to more elliptical. And this is probably. And then often you could also switch this to harmonics selection. So if you see that we will probably have these frequencies, and we could just continue to add. So just hitting the delete key. So that's the approach that I would kind of take, just kind of dialing in, and you could just kind of take different frequencies and just have those play back and listen to what you're doing the spectral editing on. But I'll check out the contest. So those are always fun to check out. Thanks for letting me know. And I just see Jazz Dudes make a comment about the external instruments. And let me just go back, make sure. Not sure if it was. Let me just. About how many external instruments we could have in. Okay, so you see how many external MIDI instruments kind of run at a time with Pro 12. So just really, if it's not routing the audio in and you have like a mixer, one of the things that you could do, there's really no limit. I personally have, I think, 23 different sound modules that, and it's really just however many, you could have however many MIDI channels and how many MIDI ports that you have. So, we have people that are doing, like I have 2 8x8 in, 8 out MIDI interfaces. You could have more. There's different, I think iConnect has multi-port USB MIDI interfaces. Probably Motu still makes some. So it's really just a limit of how many inputs and outputs that you have on your MIDI interface. But I currently have 23 on my system, and I know people have way more than I do. Sorry if I misunderstood, Patrick. All right, so we see, hey, Greg, is your PC set up? All right, let's see if I may have missed one. Sorry, I'll get to that. Question, is there a way to create a MIDI input for each pad in one instance of Groove Agent? It can have several audio outputs, but it would be nice having separate MIDI tracks for more control. If you wanted to do that, so let me just jump here to Groove Agent. I'll go to this project. All right, so let's say we have an instance of Groove Agent. All right, so some of the things that you could do to simplify this is, if you wanted more MIDI tracks that were all kind of being, routed out to the same source, but let's say if we have a pattern, so I'm not sure if you need to record that way or if you need to just actually have the ability to edit that way. So let's say if I have a pattern here, we could go to MIDI and then we could just choose to dissolve part, and then we could separate the pitches. And as we do this, now we have kick, snare, hi-hat all onto one particular, so each sound is on its own lane. Now, if you wanted to add MIDI tracks, so let's say 6 MIDI tracks. And here, once you do that, you may want to just, send it to the same MIDI port and same MIDI channel. So we could just do this. And if you only wanted the ability for each of these tracks to only play, like, this will only be C1, D1, F1, what you could do is go to the input transformer and say, okay, on this track, I want it to filter. So we'll just say filter all notes. Type is equal to note. And we'll say we want to filter value 1. Type is unequal to C1. So now any other track, any note that comes in here, it's only going to capture C1. And this one, I could say we want to do the same thing, and I want to filter out every note that's not D1. Filter out every note that's not E1. But you need to set the correct MIDI port and channel, and that way you could record like multiple sources onto one thing. But if you need it just for editing, select the event, go to MIDI, and choose to dissolve part. All right, so hey Greg, is your PC set up now to show how you can modulate any parameter from a third-party VST through an LFO? Last time you couldn't get it because your PC wasn't set up. So yeah, I think I have everything set up for that. So and I think I showed it afterwards, but we'll take a look. So let me just see if I had a project. So let's jump to this project here. All right, so what I want to do is maybe modulate a parameter. All right, so right now I'm going to go to... So right now I have this parameter being modulated, and this doesn't respond to MIDI CC. So what I did is I created a MIDI track here, just a MIDI track, and I have a loop back, and this loop back I have it set, and there's like a loop back, freeware you can get for Windows, or you could get IAC driver on Mac. So what I've done is, and on this track, so we're sending the MIDI out to our loop back. And on my MIDI inserts, I have this automatically transmitting controller 10, and this is our LFO. So to get this to work with devices that don't respond to standard MIDI mapping messages, like a lot of plugins, we go to the studio setup and we go to our generic remote. So we want to set the MIDI input here to your loopback. So we have the IAC bus out and the IAC bus going in from this track. So this track doesn't actually, this MIDI track doesn't contain any data. It's just kind of a pathway, or a conduit, if you will. And then we just said, I wanted this to go, this MIDI message to come over here to my VST mixer. And then we chose the channel. So this is going to control the plugin on glitch drums. And I went to insert, and insert 1 had a dual filter, and now it's going to control the position. So this MIDI, this LFO on this track is going out through the IAC. We set up a generic remote, and we're going to have the input of this, and you click on the plus sign, you can see your generic remote. The input's going to be the IAC driver, and then we want to basically say, okay, this is going to be, you could click on the learn message. So if this is controller 10, you can say this is controller 10. If you don't know what controller it is, click on the learn, and then as you hit play, this is going to transmit the MIDI CC. And that MIDI CC in fader 1, you want it to control the VST mixer to the channel you want. And then you go to the insert or send, and then you choose the actual parameter that you want to be modulated. And then as we do that, you hit play. So now at this point, I say, okay, I want this to do half notes. Or whole notes. Or let's say 2 measures. Or different waveform shapes. So that's how you could do it. So right. Thanks for all the great questions. Let's see how we're doing on time. All right, doing great. All right, so we see Princess LDG saying hello and that they love using Cubase 3 for my songs. It's great. And you could always just take your Cubase's projects, and at that point, if you wanted to import them into Cubase, you could import your Cubase's project right into Cubase. All right, so we see C Cone says, greetings from Germany, by the way. I appreciate your effort. Thanks a lot. All right, wonderful to see Madge Deepers joining us again from the UK. All right, so we see 704 Future about to bleed says, I think the vocal mic picked up the music. So that's why, for tracking, tracking, it's always a good idea to have closed back headphones so that you don't. So if you're doing it with speakers that are playing, it's a good chance your microphone's going to record the sound and it'll be slightly out of time and creating all sorts of lovely phase problems. So. But yeah, that's why you always see singers tracking with headphones to minimize the bleed. All right, so we see from Patrick Aaron says, I have a Yamaha Modi X. I'm guessing it would handle at least eight tracks through USB, which is all I need for external MIDI. So yeah, if you want to do that, so you could have, lots of different, it used to be like, in the old days, you'd have like one module for drums, one for piano, one for a synth, one for bass synth. But now you have one keyboard that has so many wonderful sounds in it, like the Modi X. All right, wonderful to see Matt Elston checking in from the UK. All right, so we see question. Does anyone have a Nano Control Studio remote script? I can only move faders for 8 channels, and I'm to add a button that moves between fader banks, but no luck so far. So I don't have my Nano Control. I had to send it in for repair, but if you want it, what you could do, Madge, if you have the Nano Control selected, you can come over here and you'll see mapping pages. So once you have the Nano Control selected, it's a switch. I think there is like a different mapping page where at that point you could hit the like next bank button, and then that will automatically kind of follow what you have in Cubase, but you could use the bank selection there. So I think the command is going to be like next bank within the mixer, but it should automatically be controlled. So select your Nano Control and then come in here, and there's, like you'll have Nano Control, QC control, but there is like a mixing from Nano Control, and that should automatically be configured for you. I may have mine back for Friday, so I might be able to show it then. But try just going to the mapping page, and there's like 3 or 4 different Nano Control scripts. And one of those I think will do exactly what you want without having to build it. All right, so we see question, running Cubase LE12, are you limited in editor window running in LE version? So generally the LE versions will be a subset of features, but there are more editing capabilities in the more advanced versions. But, if you're doing basic MIDI editing, it's, still incredibly powerful and capable. So I could do pretty much all my editing in the MIDI editor in LE12. If you wanted to get into the sample editor, then I don't think you're going to be able to get into like the audio warp or getting into very audio. So like where you're kind of, moving the rhythmic, easily editing the rhythmic placement of different notes or doing pitch correction. So there's probably less functional differences in the MIDI editor and more so in the audio editor. Michael Pierce just comments, no such thing as obnoxious compression. I've heard some obnoxious compression in my day, so. But a lot of people like it. All right. All right, so we say, I just see a question. Good day, Greg. I'd like to tame high frequency of a bright synth bass with a vocal group plays audio. How can I do this with a sidechain in Cubase 12 Pro? Not sure if this question was answered today. So I know that the question was emailed in, but we didn't get to it yet, but I'll go ahead and show it now. Okay, so let's come over here. Activate this project. So I think the best way to do this is to use, to do it in conjunction with like a dynamic EQ. So I set up something roughly just a couple minutes before. So before I started the live stream here. So let's go ahead and take a listen to. All right, so as I have kind of a bright synth and I have a kick drum, but it could be any audio source. So what we want to do is to, on your bright synth, we want to open up a frequency EQ plugin. And we could use one of the bands here, and we're going to activate the sidechain, and this could be from whatever source you want it to be. So it could be the vocal group or vocals. And then you'll see that, I'm going to do it just on band 1 here. So I'll just deactivate the sidechain. I'll just deactivate the plugin. So we'll start with kind of our bass. So, but now I'm going to activate this and turn the sidechain on. And so I'm going to go to this band. So I want the bass to sound. So say I want this band to. So what we could do now is I'll just click on kind of the dynamics and we'll say, okay, I want to turn on the sidechain and the dynamics. So as we So now every time that I'll adjust my cue here. So every time that that particular sidechain input comes in, and we're going to say this is going to be sidechain input 1, that we want to automatically apply the EQ to take that down, and we're going to sidechain the EQ. And if you select just a band here and then click on this button here, that will kind of show you all the different parameters. So then you could sidechain, and just that particular EQ frequencies will be sidechained. So again, it's kind of using a dynamic EQ. So we're going to trigger the EQ filter from the sidechain input. In your case, it would be the vocals. So play around with the frequency to do that. All right, so we see, hey Greg, every time I make a new track in Cubase, my color palette keeps changing. I set it up one way, and then when I start a new session, the colors change to something different, or I can't change. So sometimes, colors can be carried over from projects, and they can be migrated from projects themselves. So it's not a global thing, but it's going to be more on the project level. So try going to your project color setup, and if you want it to be consistent with all the projects that you're working on, once we come over here, you can set, okay, I want, 24 colors, I want 32 colors, I want only 8 colors to deal with, or I want, up to 4 different color tints. So once you have that, now go to the options tab. And again, this is project to project color setup, and then save color as default. And then at that point, you could just, that should be carried over for all your further projects that you work on. All right, Michael Teams wants people to smash that like button. Okay, so I just see a question. In the render settings, I'm not getting delete main source. How can I get it? All right, so a lot of times there may be different functions that are available if you have an event selected versus a track. So if we wanted to go to an event and I go to render in place, on my source event settings, I can keep the source events unchanged or mute the source events. But if I select the track here, not an event, so I don't have any event selected, just a track, and we go to render in place, we'll go to our render settings that will have the ability to disable the source tracks and to remove the source tracks. So that way it's going to be more for the entire track level as opposed to the event level. So when you select the track with no events selected, then you get disable the source tracks automatically or just remove the source tracks entirely. So try selecting the track and not the event when you're doing it, and then you'll have more options available. All right, so we see, hi Greg, did you get the email I sent to Club Cubase on creating root notes from the chord track? Thanks, Doug. So yeah, I did. So let's go ahead and take a look. And this was a question about using like a guitar plugin. I'll just go ahead and they wanted to take a part and just remove the bottom chords, the bottom notes of chords. So, and how to do that. So instead of doing it kind of at the chord track, what you could do is use the logical editor. So let's come over here. Let's go to our setup, our MIDI logical editor. And I have this set to extract to track in our functions menu. And we're going to say type is equal to note. And then we have context variable. So you can just click on insert. We'll see type is equal to note will be default. Then we're going to hit insert again. Our context variable is going to be equal to, and we can say lowest in chord, or we can say, position in chord. And here we'll say root note. So as soon as I do this, we see that I have this part here. I'll hit apply. Then all the root notes have automatically been copied directly to their own track that you could then route out to be the basis for playing like a guitar VST instrument that's now just going to play based on single notes instead of playing the whole chord. So once again, you just want to choose extract to track, and then type is equal to note, and that's the default hit. So when you hit insert and then hit insert one more time, context variable is equal to position in chord, and you can say the root note of the chord. Okay, so we have Avinash checking in from India. Thanks for joining us today. And we have Spike Williams from Wales. All right, so we see, hi Greg, when I render and place a contact instance using multiple instruments, each with separate outputs, why does render create separate blank tracks along with rendered audio tracks? You're probably using it as a VST instrument rack. So, there's instrument tracks and instrument racks. So if you are using it a MIDI track that's going to sending the information to a VST instrument rack, what's going to happen is Cubase, doesn't know what output because it's just a MIDI track. So it doesn't know what output it's going to. And where that MIDI data is going to. So it's going to render all of the outputs so that you have the particular, so that you'll have all the different instruments. Now, when it's an instrument track, Cubase knows the routing path so that it could render only the outputs that are being used for the instrument. So consider using instrument tracks, and then that should help you with that. Okay, so we see from Jay from Connecticut, I'm considering some ADAT solutions. However, I'm unclear about clocking. Can an interface clock at a rate capable by another interface if it is not natively capable within itself? So generally, you would need to have, ideally, you would want to have the same sample rates available for both audio interfaces. Sometimes, like in the old days, we could take, like if we were working with a master clock, that you could have, some master clocks would allow you to work at different divisions. Like if you're at 48K, the master clock could also kind of divide and be designed to work at 96K when it was at 48K. But ideally, you'd want to have the same sample rates so that the clocking of the interfaces, because you don't necessarily, if you're recording on multiple interfaces, you don't want to have different sample rates on some inputs and different sample rates on others. So most of the interfaces will kind of do all of the sample rates, but I guess maybe if you had like a Behringer, like 88, 8200 or whatever their 8-channel mic pre might be, their inexpensive one might be limited to 48K, and then if you're working at 96K, so I would avoid that and try to get and work at a sample rate that all of your devices can communicate at, because there's nothing worse than why is this track half the an octave lower, so. And that would just kind of cause all sorts of havoc. So ideally, have all your interfaces, be able to work with the same sample rate so that clocking is not an issue. Okay, so we have a question. Using Frontier Alpha Track fader, and if any instrument MIDI track is selected and fader is moved, pitch of the VST changes, not volume. Checked VST's reading CC number 7. Volume and note change to QC or default Cubase MIDI. So one of the things that you could do, Cubase will take whatever MIDI information is being sent to it. So it could be, what I would do is come over and just go to a MIDI track and go to the MIDI inserts. And you want to load up one called the Midi Monitor. And at this point, what you could do is move it and see what MIDI messages are actually being transmitted out. So if I just come here and I just start, let's say, I'll turn this on and I'll just get to a new track here. All right, so I go to my MIDI monitor. All right, it seems like, so now let's say if I come to, and I move the device and see what actual MIDI messages are being transmitted. And it could be that maybe it's not transmitting particular, it's not transmitting what you think. But this way you have a monitor of what exact MIDI messages are coming from your actual alpha track and see if that is transmitting what you expect. Because, Cubase is probably just responding to whatever the alpha track is transmitting. All right, so we see from Michael Pierce, his soup contribution for today is potato, zucchini, cheddar, potatoes, cover with stock, boil 5 minutes, 2 times the amount of zucchini, boil 5, plus chopped spring onions, boil 5, nutmeg, season, and add a ton of cheddar blend. Cheddar on the top, broil. Or I guess broil, yeah. So that sounds good. I'm going to try out these soup recipes when I'm adventurous after a live stream and don't have to rush to do a index. Okay, so we see from the Heartbreak Time Machine, how do I unflatten an arranger track mix? One of the things we could do, let me just open up a project. It's not really designed, you could undo it, but often what people will do is take the arranger track and you have the option to automatically create a new arrangement of it. So let's say I have my arranger track on this particular project. So, and I will come over to my arranger track and let's go to their settings. And when we do this, we could do a destination and we could choose new project. So now when I flatten the chain, it'll ask us if we want to go back to activate the new project. We'll come over here and now everything will be automatically broken out here. So it's not necessary. You can undo it right after the fact. But what it's really designed, if you choose to create a new project, the original project will always be there. So that may be a safer approach if you felt like you needed to undo it later. So you could just save that under a different name. All right, so we see from Marcel Proust, what is the best, easiest, and shortest way to change a drum sound? So let's see, and Michael Pierce asked for a quick. Okay, and thank you, Michael Pierce, for asking for more clarifications. It's not for recordings, not for recorded drums, but for sample change. Okay, so let me jump. Activate this project. And I'll revert it. Okay, so if it's like a MIDI drum part, like a sample, so let's say if I'm playing, or I'll just play like maybe from a beat agent kit. So let's say I wanted to change the kick sample. You know, one of the things I could do is come over here. While this is playing, I'm going to select the pad. And if I wanted to just go to instruments, I'll say let's... So let's say now I want to look at kicks. So while that's selected, I could just double click. So that's one method. Now, if you have, let's say, samples like on the timeline, so let's say, if I have like a kick drum sample, all right, so let's say I have like multiple samples like on my timeline here. So I'll just, all right, so let's say while I'm playing this, I could drag over drag a new sample over and hold down the shift key. And I could ask if I want to replace all the samples. So I could just select like one sample here and drag another sample replacement, hold down the shift key, say all. Say I like this sound, let me drag this over and replace all the sounds that refer to the same sample. So I can just do my sample replacement directly there. So let me know if that answers your questions. All right, reading through comments. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. And if you learned something new, make sure that you actually do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that already. Okay, so we see, I just see a comment, why has Cubase so ugly GUI? So I think it looks quite good, especially if you look at it for a long time. I think you see a tremendous amount of information in kind of relevant space, but let's just say, if I get to open up a project, for the amount of information that's displayed, you could do this. You could see a tremendous amount on kind of your inspector settings, to your right zone, to different elements on top and different functions directly here in the bottom that you have complete access to. And you could customize just about all the aspects of it as well. So, but I guess to each his own. But I think, and it's also designed so you could look at it for really long periods of time without eye strain. All right, so we see question. Noticed in the plugin manager that none of my plugins had the ASIO guard enabled setting. Is this the default? Are there some downside to enabling them, and do I have to enable each one at a time? So I think it is one at a time, but I think usually by default that they should be enabled, but maybe if you don't have ASIO guard enabled, maybe the plugins aren't. So check to make sure that you have ASIO guard enabled in the studio setup, and go to audio system, and that ASIO guard is turned on. So once again, go to studio setup, and make sure that the ASIO guard is on. And maybe that has a bearing on it as well. All right, so we see a question. Is there a way to have an audio clip follow the chord track? I use that a lot in other programs, but want to move all my music production in Nuendo. So yeah, it's really designed for, monophonic sources like bass or vocals. But really all you have to do is go to the chord track here and just tell it to follow the chords and scales. And then you could just have your notes kind of automatically follow and match the chord track for you. So, but if you say, okay, I wanted to go from, G minor to G major, or, it's not necessarily going to do that. It's really intended for monophonic sources at this time. All right, so I have a question from Mikkel Hovel. Editing for a trailer, is there a way to identify the music scales and harmonies and change some of it? So let's say if I wanted to just I'll just select like this piano part here. So if we go to the scale assistant in the MIDI editor, at this point, we could use the editor scale if we wanted to. So we could actually just come over here and have Cubase show us different scale suggestions. So when we come over here, we can say, okay, I want this to be in G sharp major. So it's in songs in G sharp. So we could or A flat. So we could have this automatically determine. So once we use the editor scale, so Cubase can show you what scale is actually in the event. You could also just come over and say, when you go to select an event, if you want to create a chord track from that, if you go to your project menu, and then we could say, let's go to chord track, and you could say create chord events, and that will create the chord events for you. Or you could do its analysis directly within the MIDI editor via the scale assistant here. So and if you wanted to, quantize or show note guides for what notes are in scale, or snap your live input, or only make edits that fall within that particular scale. You could have that set up, and even choices for only show pitches from the scale assistant. So it's not showing any other pitch. So if I just move stuff around, I know it's going to fit within the designated scale. Okay, reading through comments. Again, thanks for all the great questions. All right, so I just see a question. Hi, is it possible to demo the R&D Portico plugins? For the life of me, I can't find anything on the Steinberg site. So I was looking for it as well, and you probably sent a question to me on this. So I'm pretty sure that it used to be able to do trial versions. I meant to do it. I had yesterday off from work, but I will send an email message and see if there's trial versions are still available. Sometimes with the Rupert Neve designs, they may have, they may have limited the trial version to a particular amount of time, but I'll see if I get a clarification. But if you want to email me again, I'll send an email to the team in Hamburg and see if it's still available or why. I'm pretty sure it was available and why it may have changed. But yeah, they're really pretty amazing plugins. Okay, so we see on the MIDI editor, how can I see duplicated notes that are hidden behind? Okay, so a lot of times when I see this or get this question, it could be that we have different, like a MIDI controller that's transmitting on multiple channels. So let me go to a different project here. Okay, so if the notes are, directly hidden behind, sometimes what people will do is, come over here and they'll see that there's a whole series of notes behind. Now, the quickest way of dealing with this is maybe just to look at it in a different editor. So what you could do is look at it in a list editor. Let me just see if I could create this scenario here. All right, and I'm going to assign all these notes to a different MIDI channel. So if you have a controller that's like transmitting, so let's say instead of these all being on MIDI channel 13, I want these all to be on 14. Okay, so now when we go to look at it, and I'll merge these together. So I go to look at it here and I move a note and I see the note underneath it. So it could be hard to, edit that particular data. So what you could do is go to the list editor. So here I can say, okay, every other note is MIDI channel 13, 14, 13, 14. So at this point, what you could do is say, the easiest way to take care of this is you want to make sure that you have filters turned on here. And then we want to say filter event channels. So you can say, I only want MIDI channel 1, but I see MIDI channel 1 and MIDI channel 2. And this often happens when a MIDI controller that's like a keyboard workstation. You say, oh, I play strings and piano, and that's the patch. And that patch is transmitting MIDI channel 1 and MIDI channel 2 for each of the notes. So if they're on different MIDI channels, what you could do is, again, just say, okay, I want to take all of MIDI channel, I'm going to select an event. So I want all MIDI channel 14. And I'm going to say select all, Control or Command A, and delete. And then when I go back, we can say our filters, there's no focus, and now only channel 13 is available. Now, if everything is on the same channel, you could go to MIDI, to Functions, and choose Delete Doubles. And then if notes are doubled and they're on the same channel, but sometimes when that doesn't work is because they're not doubles, because they're each on different MIDI channels. So try selecting it, go into the list editor, go to the little setup window, make sure filters is turned on, select one of the channels, one of the messages. If you see that they're on different channels that you want to get rid of, the unintended one, it's layered, and then choose event channels for the focus, select all, delete. Okay, and another question, how to select sounds from Windows GS MIDI output. All right, so let's say if I don't have a Windows PC, but a lot of times what you could do is you just activate this. If it's sent to a MIDI port, so what you could do is just come over. Let's try this approach. Let's go to our studio setup let's go to our MIDI device manager. Let's go to studio menu. To more options. And let's get to our MIDI device manager. So let's say we want to install a device. So I'm going to say, I think you said general MIDI. Just let me make sure. Okay, so a GS device. Okay, so we'll just say GM. Okay. And yeah, and as we come here, we'll say, okay, it's going to be our general MIDI device, and we want to open the device. We give it a port. So we say, okay, this is connected to my my Steinberg port here. So now, as soon as I come over here, I'll say, let's add a MIDI track. And we're going to route this out to we'll see a GM driver here. All right, and now I could come right over here, and then you could see all your general MIDI or XG patches if you sign that right there. All right, so we see a question, how to see the full names of presets of the project logical editor or input transformer. This may wig out my virus protection software from my company. So, but let's say we go to our input transformer. I'll come here. Let's say we want it at project level. I apologize if some reason our corporate virus software just doesn't like this as much. All right. So as soon as I come here, I could see all the presets by name just right here. And so you can just see directly there. So then it's the same in the logical editor. And I know in version 12, the preset management has changed for logical editor and project logical editor and input transformer. Okay, so we see a question, how to get the MIDI input transformer from a MIDI channel in Cubase 12. So it used to be that it was kind of hidden here and a bit of a cryptic icon. So in Cubase 12, it was changed so it could be more accessible. So we could just see right here, input transformer in the top tab. And at that point, we could just set up your track or insert. So, and then we could say, okay, now we could open the panel. So instead of the little squiggly line that was kind of more streamlined and a bit more obvious, but if you always looked for the squiggly line after doing it for 30 years, at this point, it's now kind of directly within this window here. So you see the input transformer, and then you could just choose open panel. All right, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. Can we increase the waveform view of a single or specific audio track? So it's going to be global. So if we wanted to do, and we'll show you how to do this quickly here. All right, so it's this little zoom factor right here. So it's not going to be necessarily, so if it's like just zooming the amplitude, and I think it's Alt or Option plus G and H, you could do that. So it's not single, it's going to be just a global function for all of it. But, you know, one other tip, if you wanted to take, you know, if we select this track, there is, if you go to Edit menu, you could do an Enlarge selected track. So let's say now if I click here on this track, we could enlarge the selected track, kind of like this. So any track that is selected will get larger visually. So that's another thing to try. But if you're just kind of zooming the amplitude of the waveform, it's going to be global. And you could do it right here, or just Alt Option G plus H. Okay, just thanks for all the great questions. See, Mark Winslow is saying, thanks for another great session. How come there's only one like button? So you get hit it 3 times. I think if you hit it an odd number of times, it will do that. But you could leave a good comment in the video itself if you like it. Okay, so we see why Cubase 12 is not working on Mojave. You lose a lot of customers like me. So, you know, definitely try the trial version, because there's lots of people that are, you know, that seem to be running Cubase 12 on Mojave. So sometimes why you may see the distinction that it's not listed as the operating system is they may not go through, you know, the 6 versions of every 6 or 7 versions of every Mac OS in all of the quality testing. But I know people that are running Cubase 12 on Catalina. So definitely try the trial version, and you might be pleasantly surprised that it works just fine for you. But it's just that Steinberg hasn't gone through, you know, like they're not going to do testing on Windows 95 for new versions. So at some point they have to kind of, you know, make a decision on, you know, if we're doing 6 versions of, you know, Windows 11, 10 versions of Windows 10 testing, you know, 6 versions of Mojave, you know, 7 versions of Monterey. You know, it takes a lot of time to do that. And plus, you know, sometimes, you know, as new processors are coming out, you know, certain companies will, you know, make sure that it's not working. But, you know, try the trial version and you could see how it runs on your system. But we have lots of people that are running it in Mojave and, you know, even earlier. Wonderful to see Sable Winters on the live stream. All right, my chat field just jumped. Let me see if I can find my place. Okay, so I think I'm back to where I was. All right, so you see from Eric Sampson, what is the difference between adjusting gain in the pre-section and adjusting clip volume on the project editor? So they really kind of get you to the same area. So if you, so as soon as we do clip gain here, so clip gain we see visually. When we are working, let me just change the preference back. So we can see this visually. So if I wanted to just take a portion of the audio file here and, you know, bring this up or down, I could just say, okay, let's just do this, you know. So that's where clip gain is really good, but I think we could only go up to, you know, there's a limit here. So let me just see. I think it's 24 dB up with this. Now, when we do clip gain in the actual, and this is all kind of before it hits the inserts, EQs, sends. So, you know, it's kind of considered pre-gain. So, but if I wanted to set it globally, what would make more sense at times is just to go into like the mix console here. And let's say we go to the channel settings. And if I didn't need it to change on different sections, that's when we could just add additional gain here. And we get up to 48 dB of gain directly on the system right there. So, you know, so this, I often use clip gain more for editing. A lot of times like breaths or, you know, this is just a little too loud. Just bring this note down. And if I wanted to kind of send a lot of gain to heavily compress something, you know, where I just want it really kind of squashed, but I need a lot of input gain and I didn't need it to be adjusted throughout the project dynamically, then I might choose to use the actual, you know, at that point I would use the pre-gain on the channel. See, Filter Freak is just saying Razor's just brilliant, top notch on drums. I see this. Wow, Mr. Undo, you're the first person to ever pronounce my name correctly. So I won't try it again because I'll probably mess it up now. But glad I got one right. I'm sure I mispronounced thousands of names. But glad I got lucky. All right. See, Patrick is just mentioning this is a lightning live stream. That's good. All right, so we see a question from Doug O. Says custom voicings on the chord track. Can you confirm where does this take effect? I.e., if I drop audio in a chord track and chords are extracted, does it simplify detected chords? All right, so let's go ahead and open up a project here. All right, so I'm going to just take this guitar part and we'll just drop it in. So at this point, we just drop it in. So I don't think that the chord detection is going to, when we go to the custom voicing here, that it's really, that this I think that as we enter chords in and how we want the chords to interact with other parts, that is when you get into more of the custom voicings. But I don't think it really has an impact on the detection and extraction of chords, like when dropping it in to simplify. So, but I think the chord detection from audio works way better than it should. So. All right, so we see question. My Pro 11 crashed when I went to edit a score. Now, even when I try score editor on that song, the program stops. Other projects seem fine. Any ideas? So check to see, usually, by default, Cubase will have a backup, and it may be at the same level as the project, and it may be like called a .bak file. So you may see the same project name .bak instead of .cpr. See if you have one of those to open up. Often, if you do send in a project to Steinberg, that is corrupted, that they might be able to take a look at it. I've had people send projects to me, and sometimes opening it on a different system and resaving it can make a difference as well. One other thing to try is, take that particular project, and say you want to import tracks from project. And at this point, you can say, okay, I want to import the tracks from this project, and we can see all the different tracks, and try importing the tracks. And you can do this for MIDI or audio, and try importing the instrument or MIDI track independently into a new project and see if that opens in the score editor. Sometimes you could kind of fool it around. You could maybe trick it that way and get the track back in. All right, so I just see, hello, I want to move from Ableton to Cubase. What are the pros and cons in comparison to Ableton? So I don't run Ableton, but I think Cubase is going to be, it's an incredibly comprehensive solution, and it doesn't really predispose particular workflows. So you could kind of work exactly how you want. I think it has a wonderful audio engine, so like the processing will sound better, your mixes will sound better, and it's just probably more robust for a lot more different types of tasks. But I don't run Ableton, so I may not be the best one to pick to compare. But plus Cubase has these cool live streams for 8 hours a week, so where you get all your questions answered. All right, so we see the artist known as Love checking in from New York, and he's already hit the like button, and Sable Winters is like number 130. All right, so we see from Eric Ross, Greg, can you have the Cubase UI set up to have the one mixer channel, whichever channel is highlighted in the main timeline? I'm just looking for a pan and volume control, nothing special. All right, so let's say I have a number of audio tracks going on. All right, so if you just want to see the volume and pan, just come over here and you could just activate the fader. So whatever channel that you're on, you could just see that you'll have like the fader and pan control directly selected as you come here. So let me know if that's what you want. So just try activating just the fader, and then you could just see fader and pan control for whatever is selected, just like that. All right, so we see Anders McCormick just says, just found these live streams, so much useful info. So yeah, we have, it's probably like, I think since COVID started, is like maybe our 243rd live stream. So we're going to be doing 250 probably sometime in October. So maybe we should do something special for 250th live stream. So let me know if you guys want to do anything for that. All right, Anders McCormack just says, can we ask questions here? So yeah, just type your question in, and we'll be happy to try to get all your questions answered for you. All right, so we see, what is the difference between track quick controls and VST quick controls? Okay, so when we come over here to quick control. So we could have a track quick control. So let's say I wanted this to be my volume and settings for a track. All right, so I come here, go to my quick controls. So at this point, we could have our volume and everything set up for a track. But now, when we want to go to an instrument, I may want to have different instrument quick control parameters configured. So this way, like when an instrument is selected, I could have the instrument set, or if I select the track, I could say this is going to be volume pan, my filters, and sends 1 and 2. So it really just is what the area of focus is. So and now in version 12, we could come over here and just easily set different quick control parameters, where if I wanted to control volume panning of like the audio characteristics, or if I wanted to control like an oscillator and filter on a synth, I could have that as my instrument quick controls, and my volume panning send 1 as track quick controls. All right, so we have a question from Anders McCormack. Is there an easy way to label tracks for stems without having to change the track name? Maybe adding a tag or something. So it really depends on how much you want to name, like change the names. But if we go here to the export audio mixdown, we could click on the naming scheme. So this would allow us to say, okay, I want to have the project name. I want to add today's date. We could have free text. So we could say, okay, my free text is, Club Cubase live stream. And we're going to come over here. This is going to be the channel name. This will be the project name. So we could just kind of add different parameters here, including free text. So if you say, okay, this is my next free text, and this is, September 20th. So, there are different kind of naming schemes that you could add. So it's not going to say, kick to kick drum necessarily, but you can add other different kind of naming. So if you want to do like a new scheme and different separators, and you could see a preview here of different naming elements. So if you wanted to add different things to the track names, you could do that, or not have the track names listed at all. All right, so I just see a comment from Russell, just says tracks in folder not in sync group edit could fail. So sometimes when you're doing particular types of group editing and it notices that maybe, one of the files is much shorter, one is longer, that, you may get a message just to give you a heads up that, some of these will, while it's expecting to see like similar length files that maybe you did different overdubs, or, there's going to be files that are, may extend beyond the limit or boundaries of other tracks. So it just kind of gives you a little warning message. So I found as long as it's in the ballpark that, your group editing will carry over. But it's just kind of a warning message. Don't think that you can't do group editing if you see that particular message show up. Okay, so from Mayberry78, hi, what would be the use of different mix consoles available? So if I wanted to only see, let's say this mix console, like let's say I was doing a large live tracking thing, like a live concert, and I only wanted to see input channels. And we could say on input, on mixer 3, I only wanted to see, let's say compressors. I want to see compressors and let's say group channels and effects channels and VCA. So I could see, so this just allows you to see different types of tracks for different purposes. So we may have, you want to see input channels, you want to see all your effects channels, all your instrument channels, and have them on different independent mixers. That's really kind of the intention of it. Okay, wonderful to see Graham Witcher from Royal Wooten Bassett. Glad you could make it today. Okay, so we see from Eric Ross, how can I adjust MIDI for latency? When I record a virtual instrument, it sounds like I'm playing on time, but MIDI notes are just slightly behind on screen. Is there a compensation for it? So there is in the current version of Cubase where you may notice that there might be a little graphics anomaly between like the project window view and the editor view. So make sure that it's actually earlier in time. So one thing you could do is always check if you go to the virtual keyboard, hit Alt or Option plus K, and then, just try, recording, just clicking on the mouse or your actual, just on the keys of your keyboard, and just record that along with the project. So you come and say, okay, I'm going to record. All right, and I'll just put my metronome on. Oh, sorry. And just come here and see. And when you record, see if the on-screen keyboard is off. Now, sometimes you may have just like a MIDI driver that is not transmitting correctly. If you're on the Windows platform, if you go to Studio Setup with some older legacy MIDI interfaces, and you might go to the MIDI port setup, and on the Windows version, you may see something like ignore port filter. So you could try to check that and see if it makes a difference. But if you go into the audio system, there is kind of just, adjust for recording latency should automatically be turned on. But see if you get the same exact results from the virtual keyboard from Alt or Option plus K as you do on your MIDI keyboard. And if it kind of works as expected with the virtual keyboard, then that would lead to think that it's going to be something with the driver of your MIDI controllers connected to. All right, so we see from Russell, error messages since updating the 12 real-time algorithm, pitch and stretch factors outside limits and tracks in folder, not in sync, group editing can fail. So, if you're doing, like extreme, like, okay, I want to take this bass part down 2 octaves, that might set off kind of a trigger like that. But Russell, if you could let us know if it's actual... if you're actually not able to do group editing or you're just getting kind of a warning message about it, that would be helpful. Yeah, we see Patrick just mentioning in the next Cubase sale that he will take advantage of it. So yeah, take advantage of it now is a great one going on. So 40% off. You see next one, I said Patrick just says he likes his Steinberg's upgrade paths. His next sale, he's going for Cubase Pro. So glad you're able to take advantage of the promotion. All right, so we see, is there an automatic or random MIDI strum option in Cubase? There's probably some automatic, there might be a logical editor function, but I'll show you just a little trick here as well. All right, so let's say I just have... All right, so one of the tools that's kind of often underutilized that you could use for this, try just grabbing the trim tool. And I think if you hold down like the Alt or Option key, you could just do kind of strumming just like that. And you could change kind of the angle if you wanted to do more or less. So if everything is kind of starting at the same point, you could just change the angle of that. So again, the Alt or Option key, and then you could just kind of do strums just that easily. So give that a shot. All right, so we see Limith Official joining, saying hi. So welcome to the live stream. All right, so we see Sable Winters, just speaking of Daryl. So yeah, please give Daryl our best and tell him we look forward to his return when he's got all of his everything in order. But please let him know that we're thinking of him and using our thoughts. All right, so I just see a question. Sometimes when I program drums in Groove Agent in one MIDI event, some sounds cut each other off. If there's MIDI overlapped, example, the kick gets cut off by clap and or hi-hat, it sounds weird. So check to make sure when you're doing that. So Groove Agent has a little function. Let me just show you where it's at. Always forget where this one function is at. But basically you could do like different groups. So it might be that you have but sometimes you see it with hi-hats so that you don't have like two hi-hat samples playing on top of each other. But there is kind of a setting in Groove Agent where you could, like, you know, so that you can't have two hi-hats playing. It's like a little group. I'm just kind of having a brain cramp on the name of it, but there is kind of a way to that Groove Agent could be set up for that, but also make sure that you don't have, you know, because with MIDI, you know, if you have like the same note, let's say this note is coming in before a MIDI note off message occurs, you know, because you can only have the one MIDI note playing at a time. So if you have another MIDI note message that is, you know, on top of it, that may not be so obvious. Like, let's say we look at this and we say, okay, you know, this MIDI note is long and this is another, you know, I would look at it like as you're playing it, go to the MIDI list editor and see if you see notes that are kind of, you know, where the same MIDI note is on top of other MIDI notes, and see if that's causing like a note off message to come on, like if you have two different MIDI notes kind of playing very closely in time. So, and I'm sure I'll remember as soon as I end the live stream what the grouping function is, but it's like a group in Groove Agent. Or you see Sable Winters was like number 110 instead. So. All right, so we see from Mr. Mangle, what is the best way to record the output of VSTi to an audio track? So if you need to, if you don't need to record it, probably the easiest way is to just do like a render in place. So let's say if I have this as my audio source, I could just, or my MIDI source. So, if you don't have to record it in real time, you could go to like render in place, and then that will just automatically, turn the MIDI track into an audio file. Now, if you needed to actually record it, where you wanted to record MIDI and audio simultaneously, what we could do is add a group channel to the selected channel. So I'll say, let's make it a stereo group. And I want to add an audio track. And for this input, I want it group 1. And that's the group that we just created. I will arm the piano and the audio track. And now as I would record, so say I'll just solo these as well. So now as I record, that I can just record the audio and MIDI simultaneously if that's the approach you want to take. So, but probably the fastest way if you record MIDI, just render in place, or if you want to capture the MIDI and audio together simultaneously from virtual instruments, route it to a group, and then take that group channel as the input for an audio channel, place both and record. See, Michael Pierce is saying on October 8th, the BBC is turning 100, so that's wonderful. And the 18th, rather. All right, so we have a question. Cubase LE12, when doing your mixdown, is it better to not have a compressor in your stereo outs and only do it in the mastering phase, or do you do both? So sometimes it's common for people to have a bit of compression on the master bus. Some people, if you're sending it to a mastering engineer, if you're sending it to a world-class mastering engineer, I would let the world-class mastering engineer put the compressor on the stereo bus and let him have control of all of the dynamic, all the dynamic manipulations as is possible to give more flexibility. Excuse me. One analogy I heard was, it's hard to unburn the steak. So if you do too much compression, then you're passing on that file to someone else, then it could be problematic. But if it's something that you're doing for yourself, or if it's not going through a critical quality assurance phase from a record label or mastering engineer, it's fine. I would say 95% of people put a touch of compression on the master bus. So like anything, don't overdo it, and you should be in fine shape. See, Sable Winters is saying Cubase is beautiful to me, so that's good. Okay, so we see, sorry, should have been more clear. Question, is it possible to identify the music scales and harmonies and change some of it from an audio file, WAV file? So there are some tools that do it, and some of them are like, but it could be a little hit or miss, more on the miss side. So I don't think technology is quite there. I mean, we could do some of this stuff with spectral layers and splitting out the audio, but it's, hard to say, okay, I want to take, the guitar part in this and change this chord from a G minor to a G major seventh with, a D in bass. So stuff like that is not quite there. Okay, so we have a question. My client is asking for all the track out separations with the plugins already embedded into them. Can you go over how to process that? So if you wanted to make stems for your client, what you would do, probably the easiest way. So let's say I take this project here, and I'll just hide my lyrics. So let's say I have, all of my different effects. I have EQs, inserts, and I wanted to keep all of the effects. So what I would do now is just come over here and say export audio mixdown. We want to select multiple. I'll say, okay, we'll give a stereo mix. We'll give all of our group channels, all of our instrument channels, all of our audio channels. And at this point, we could say, you'll see effects, and you can say, I want to have the groups and sends. And now what this will do is it'll make equal length audio files for every single element with all of the effects embedded in the individual files. So, and if you wanted to send it dry, you could just simply say, at this point, you just want it to be disabled. If you wanted to have the inserts and the channel strip, or if you wanted to include the sends, you could do that. So once again, file, export, audio mixdown, select multiple, select all the different sources, and at this under the effects section, at this point, just export audio, and you'll be all set. So I just see, hi, when I use tempo detection on 12 after I analyze, if I don't close the box and click anywhere in the project window, if I hit continue, it crashes. It doesn't happen in 11 with the same preferences. So I've run into that in earlier versions, maybe 10 or 9.5 that it did it to me. So, you see that you have the same preferences, but, if you delete or if you disable the preferences, just out of curiosity, let me know if it does the same thing. So as soon as I go to my tempo detection, and I've had earlier versions of Cubase that did that, and it was kind of annoying. So I understand kind of frustration with that, but let me just to assure you. And make sure that you're running at least 1204, the latest version of that. But as soon as I come here, we'll just say, let's go to our tempo detection. So I'm going to select the event first. That would help. All right. So analyze. All right. So I'll just go ahead and click anywhere here. So if I make my adjustments, you can see that it doesn't. I'll just hit continue now, and everything is kind of functioning. So try holding down Alt Control Shift or Command Option plus Shift, and start the program without, with completely fresh preferences, not migrating them from 11, and see if that makes a difference for you. So I just see a comment, wish Portico would go on sale. So yeah, a lot of times when we're working with third-party companies, that, you know, we have more restrictions on sales for that, for royalty purposes and stuff like that. See, Lee G says, great question. Bane of my life, leaving the studio Logic in 4-split mode. So, yeah, it's a bummer. All right, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. How to save all my Cubase configs if I need to reload them due to some error? Thanks. So pretty much everything can be, the vast majority of settings can be just stored. If you go to the Edit menu and go to Profile Manager, and what you could do is just simply export your profile. So you see, I migrated my profile over from my previous computer, and that's what I'm running. So export your profile, save it to a thumb drive, put on, you know, Google Drive, whatever, and import it into the later version. That's always a good thing to do. All right, so Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of strawberry ice cream. Thank you so much. All right, so we just see from Got Your, it says, on the subject of speaking, if you don't have to be in the list editor to delete doubles, just go to the MIDI poll menu, functions, and select delete doubles. Bunch of other great MIDI edits in there. So sometimes it may not show up if they're on different MIDI channels. If the actual, you know, if it was a keyboard that was transmitting on multiple MIDI channels at once, then it's not seen as a double because it's actually on, you know, it's actually different MIDI messages. All right, so we see, thanks for the tip on the Midi Monitor. Was able to figure out is an alpha track mode options. That's great. Thanks for letting me know. All right, I know we had a couple questions that were mailed in. Thanks for, let's get to some of those before it gets too crazy and we get run out of time. Thanks for all the great questions. Hope that everyone has learned a lot of new tips. Okay. So we had a question mailed in. How to add plugins on individual audio files in a WaveLab audio montage. Okay, so sometimes when we're dealing with a montage, we may have different different files. We may need to EQ one song differently than another song. And if we have kind of a global EQ going on, that could be problematic because it's going to EQ the same file all the time. So the trick is, let's say, let me just say we have a montage here. So we could have, and we come to our default plugin view, and as we're here, we could see that we're going to have, you know, plugins globally set up. So if I wanted to come to my master rig or my mastering and say, okay, we open up master rig, every single project is going to go through, every file is going to go through this particular plugin, like a master effect. But if we wanted to apply it to individual effects, what we do is click on the inspector. And as we select an event, we could now open up different plugins with different settings. So let's say we come here, and I select a different clip. And now that we go to clip again, we could just load up again different EQs, different plugins on different clips. So again, we'll come open up, let's say master rig here. So as we would select different clips, we would now have these plugins show up just on individual clips. And if we wanted to add a different track, at this point, we could just right click and we'll say, let's add a stereo track. We could have track based. So if I want to have different effects all on this track and different effects on this track, different independent plugins on each clip, or global in the master section. So we could handle it just like that. My son just walked in my room. All right. All right, and we had a question last live stream about the global like root key. So I was playing around with that, and I think I got it kind of figured out. All right, so let's jump to this project here. All right, so let's say, you know, the content that comes with Cubase, if it's kind of harmonic based, like, you know, not just rhythmic based, we'll see different root keys available. So let's say I look at this, we're going to have, I think this will be a lovely example. Sorry, just revert this quickly. Okay, so we listen to it. All right, so we have a lovely harmony of this song. Let's say I think the root key is in B. And I think this one was in the key of F. All right, so what we could do is what I missed last week was just to add. So now that these are in musical mode, we play these back. So the keys of B and F generally aren't like wonderful choices to play together. So what I want to do is to add my root key at the top here. So we'll just see project root key. So now that this is in B, this is in F, I'm going to say, let's make it all play in D. We'll meet in the middle. So now I set it to D. The audio and MIDI can automatically transpose. So whatever we put in the global, but you may have to just go to the settings and make sure that you have the project root key activated. And then other files that have the root key metadata embedded in it will now kind of automatically transpose to fit into the project root key. All right, so we had a question is about having scrolling issues on Cubase 12 and Max. Is one scroll is very little effect, 3 scroll clicks is way too much. Tried a wired mouse, Bluetooth, trackball, all lead to the same results. Works fine in any other app except Cubase. And they were kind enough to attach a video, and it seemed like it was jumping a little bit, but I'll go to open up a big project so that we could see. Let's say this one's kind of a big... Okay, and I'll open up all folders. So it's about 80 some tracks. So I think my son maybe got, our cat may be biting our son. Hang on, let me close the door. Check, see if he's okay. Hang on. All right, sorry about that. My son got bit by the cat. So let's take a look at just kind of the scrolling on this. So let's say I would just play kind of a big project.
Wake up, wake up, wake up. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ven, te invito a que mires aquí por este cristal que ni engaña ni miente. Lo que ves esa gente que no se tiene piedad, ni aunque se la entregue.
Here it just kind of all seems.
Ahora fíjate si puedes en lo que va a pasar cuando cambies
Seems to scroll smoothly on my end, but one thing that may affect this, if you go to preferences, and let's see if it's under. Is there's a disabled GPU on Mac, but it seems to always run fine on mine. Let me just. So under user interface, try toggling the disabled GPU acceleration and see if that makes a difference. So, so user interface preferences, user interface, and see if you disable the GPU acceleration. All right, so question. I have a PreSonus Studio 24C as my I.O. device. How do I add it to Cubase? It works with Portico, but it is not listed in Studio Setup. I just purchased Cubase. All right, so if it's working in, your studio, if it's working in Portico, it should be working, but make sure you go to the audio system here and that you select the actual driver for the PreSonus interface right there. So make sure you go to audio system and under the ASIO driver that you select it. All right, so we have a question. Why does tempo track affect my project's BPM even when tempo tracks are not loaded in my project? I know that this is the case when I accidentally activate tempo track icon at the BPM setting at the bottom of the screen, Cubase version 1204. However, it seems more complex. The signature tracks pick up the tempo track settings, it seems, and the tempo track data is also written to the signature tracks. Okay, so let's go ahead and let me just try this real quick. Okay, so here I have like a static tempo at 75 beats a minute, and we're in 6/8 time. So it says you have to be careful if you have a signature track in the template and not a tempo track, because if you accidentally activate the tempo track icon, shortcut T, the tempo can be affected, which happened to me. Is that correct, Greg? I think I missed. So let's say right now I'm going to play. I'm going to add a signature track. And let me add the tempo track. And I'll activate the tempo track here. And then let's say. All right, so now I have my tempo setting, kind of activating it. So maybe it was like you had a tempo track. Let's say if we had like subtle tempo changes here and it was disabled, but maybe the value was set to like 75 beats a minute. And then as we played,
I feel you? How can I see?
so now it's just going to play back at 90 beats. But now if I turn my tempo track on, it's going to follow. But if I bypass it, so maybe it's kind of following tempo track data that's already existing on there. So, but let me know if I did something different. Okay. Okay, answer that one. Okay, answer those. All right, and I think we had gotten a question from Michael Pierce. I didn't copy it down, but let me just try it here, I guess. And he had done kind of a group export, and like it seemed like his effects were off on it. So let me just go ahead and recreate that. I'll just do it with the drums here. Okay, so let's say I have all of my drums all assigned to a group. And let's say these are all assigned to a effect send as well. All right, so now when we come here, all right, and I'm going to send all these to the group. All right, so I think this was a scenario, and what Michael had done, he said he had too much reverb, but let's say we have like this basis for the reverb for our drums. All right, and let's do a quick export audio mix down. So I'm going to just include the group channel, and we'll select multiple, and then I'm going to just choose the groups and send, and I'm going to import it into the project. So we'll create a new audio track, and we'll do it just for a small part of the time for the left and right locators. Okay, and let me just not have all of those selected. Do it again. All right, so now we listen to it, and so it seems like it's the same, but you know, the one difference that it may be, Michael, is when you go to, and I'll look at the screenshot you sent, but when you go to audio mixdown, instead of single, try putting it on multiple and then doing the group there and see if that helps. All right, so with that, we're just out of time. I want to thank everyone for the wonderful questions. If you have learned something new, make sure you subscribe to the channel and that you hit the like button, and we'll be back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing everyone on Friday. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Goodbye.